Okay, hello everybody. June and I are here again to talk about AI and how to use it. For this month, we are going to have a fun, silly example, a tavern generator. We're going to start by showing you the tavern generator. Then we're going to run through not 10, but 12 tips that can all be demonstrated with this particular little website that I'm about to show you. First, though, let's start with a user story. This is very personal and near and dear to my heart. As a lazy game master, I want cool tavern descriptions that fit my setting so that my friends think I'm much more clever than I am. If you've ever played D&D, you know that there's all sorts of descriptive, creative content of like the world, and your game master has to make most of that up. And it's very hard to do that and be clever and creative all the time, especially in the moment. So I'm going to switch over and show you a little tiny personal project that I put together to help me with this that uses OpenAI. Okay, can everybody see the Tavern generator? Awesome. So this is a form that you go through and you answer questions. And this is going to be interactive. Could someone yell out an answer to the first question here?
Crossroads.
Okay, we're looking for a tavern in a crossroads. Now we
Swamp.
can pick up to 3 swamp. Do they want to add anything or just swamp?
Underground.
Perfect. We'll go with that. So we've got an underground swamp at a tavern at an underground swamp crossroads.
Fishermen and miners.
What'd you say?
Miners and fishermen.
Miners and fishermen. That checks out. Now, this is the first point that we call the AI, and it comes back with a list of possible names. We've got the underground rats.
The swamp sand.
What are we going to go with? I mean, I feel like hissing toad is what we have to do.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Conformity.
If you didn't like these, we could click the I don't like any and it would re-roll with new answers from the AI. We're now sending off for it to take everything, all the context we have so far, and describe the outside of this thing. Now we've got 2 different answers. One, a thatched roof that is sagging with a lopsided appearance with mold and mildew.
Nice.
Another one that the building actually just looks like a mound of overgrown vegetation with a gaping hole. 2 very different descriptions, 2 very different vibes. Anybody have a preference?
B.
Yeah.
Nick's house.
Oh, making the hairs on your neck stand up. I would never have been able to write that myself. That is much more creative than I am. This is the last step of it. So since it's a live demo, I'm sure this is the step at which it's going to break. And it did. That's perfect. Okay. We'll call it there. You get the idea. Answering a few simple questions got me much more interesting and creative content than I could have ever come up with myself. And under the hood here, putting this together, we learned a whole bunch of random stuff, and we're going to share that with you now. So let me go ahead and go back to our slides and jump through the learnings. Any questions about what we just saw before we dive in? Okay, let's go into it. The very first one, our tip when working with AIs is to avoid single prompt fixation. Lots of times we try to solve the entire problem in a single prompt. In this case, though, that was really never going to work out really well. It turns out that it was much, much easier to solve each step of the problem in its own prompt, and then just kind of like merge that stuff together at the end. So we start with a name, then we get the exterior, then we get the interior. Eventually we could add a menu or the description of the barkeep, whatever. This doesn't just apply to creative writing, it applies to other types of problems too. We've talked about some stuff like auto grading, and we try to go straight from like answer to a grade. In some cases, it makes more sense to actually have the AI make like 5 different decisions and then have like a traditional algorithm turn that into a grade. For tip number 2, oh, sorry, this also shows avoiding the single prompt fixation, just like accruing the past answers to give context to the next step so that each thing is not handled entirely on its own. Our second tip is to use ChatGPT to help you do this in the first place. For me, I start any project by just talking to ChatGPT about what I'm trying to do. I throw random instructions at it and see how it handles it. And it becomes very quickly apparent what it's good at, what it's great at, what it's okay at, and what just like confuses the heck out of it. And so if you start there, you can learn very, very fast. I did mention use 3.5. If you use ChatGPT 4 and then you go to use the AI endpoints, those don't use the same model as ChatGPT 4. So you will be sorely disappointed because that stuff isn't out yet. Our next tip is how to get more answers. Lots of times you want more than one thing to choose from. And there it turns out that there's lots of different ways to do that. The first one is that you can give it a prompt and a value for n, and it will spit out n answers. Now, cost-wise, this costs the exact same as if you ran the prompt n times. So it's not super efficient for cost. Sometimes you still want one answer, but you want it to think through multiple answers and pick the best one on its own. This is baked in. You can just have it do that. This would cost the exact same as running the same prompt 5 times, but it uses its own like underlying, essentially confidence scores to pick which one it thinks that you're going to like the most, or that is the best answer for the prompt. You can also just do this with prompting. And what I like about this is that this actually saves money on the token cost because you're running a single prompt, only getting the context once, and getting back multiple answers. Now, the parsing of this sucks because it will give that list back in all different ways, sometimes with hyphens, sometimes with bullet points, sometimes with numbers, sometimes with 2-line breaks. It's a nightmare. Which brings us to tip number 6. You can avoid parsing by asking it to give you back responses in JSON formatted structures. So you can literally just say, give me the 5 answers, and I want that in a JSON array of strings. And you will get back a JSON array of strings. What's crazy about this is that OpenAI doesn't actually know anything about JSON encoding. It's just like guessing because it's seen it so many times. So every so often, it will do something silly like leave out a comma, and then your JSON parsing breaks. So I just told you this like helps you avoid parsing, but if you get broken JSON, that doesn't really help you at all. Brings us to tip number 7. This is the new JSON decode method for AI generated content. In here, we fire off what we got back to a regular built-in JSON decoder. If you get an error, you can take the payload and ask the AI to fix it.
That's cool.
Yeah. And it does it most of the time in the first attempt. Sometimes it may take multiple attempts for it to finally fix it. But this is a pretty mind-blowing thing for me. This type of like fuzzy correction of data is something that we have never really gotten to have before. And this might be one of the more powerful things that AI can actually do for us. Okay, let's talk about temperature. Temperature is a setting that basically controls creativity. So high temperature means it tries to do something very creative, very unusual. Low temperature means you will get almost an exactly deterministic response. You'll get the same thing over and over again. So in this example, our temperature is set to 0, and I run it 3 times, and I get back the exact same 3 answers. Now, this feels safe, and it's like good for testing, but you'll probably like never use temperature 0 in production, unless you're like specifically trying to limit its creativity, so you only get like certain answers. As we increase the temperature, like what we saw in the demo today, that was temperature 1, you start to see quite a bit of variation. But here you'll see there's still a lot of like patterns that it's using. Like most tavern names start with the word the for some reason. And if you crank the temperature up, you start to get some of the craziest stuff ever, like the Inquisitor handkerchief in, or my favorite one, the Let It Sick Office Pizza Soft Shine Dubstep.
Wow.
Yeah, so this is why this slide is not titled Crank Up the Temperature, but set the right temperature. There's another setting called top P, and this one's kind of interesting because what it does is it kind of limits the tokens that it's allowed to build the answer with. And this one's like pretty complicated. A very low top P means that it's only going to use like the 10% of words that are the most like likely to be the answers. A higher top P means it's going to use like a much larger set of words. And so the best analogy I have for this is like only getting to build something out of like the beginner set of Lego pieces and not getting to use like all the Lego pieces that have ever been manufactured. So really low top P in this case gives you like simple words. And as you like increase the top P, you get like much more variety in the words that it uses. Okay. At this point, I have given the first 10 tips, and I'm going to hand it over to June, who's going to take you through the remaining tips and also talk about what we're going to see next month. June?
Thanks. Welcome to June's bonus tips.
Hey, June.
Next slide, please. Yeah, so one of the things that comes in handy a lot of the time is if you are expecting like a specific format that includes a very specific number of tokens. So like if you're looking for just a number, like in this example, you can set max tokens, and that just limits the amount of tokens that you get back from your response. This also comes in handy a lot in if you are using fine-tuning for categorization. For some reason, I've noticed that a lot of the times it'll throw some extra stuff in there once you've trained it, usually repeating the prompt back in part. So like using that max tokens is like very helpful once you get into fine-tuning. Yeah, and then next slide. Our 12th tip is, so in this last example we were talking about, you noticed that it was like loading, but you also noticed that we have like a set number of parameters that you're going through, set number of options. So one of the things we could do to improve that load time is send all of those prompts ahead of time and cache it. So in order to do that in a way that doesn't just bombard the API endpoint and end up hitting request rate limits, you can send up to 20 prompts, I believe, in a single request. So batching and caching. Yeah, and that's it. Next month, we are going to be talking about creating a chatbot with a specific knowledge base. So that'll be fun and maybe even helpful.
Okay. June, what questions does anyone have?
I have a question. Can you, like, if you set the temperature higher, can you like mitigate that with top P? Like set that lower so it like gives you like better words but more variety?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. The documentation specifically recommends like only tuning one of those parameters. And then it also has a large table of how you can adjust both parameters to get what you need. And so that is exactly like you're right on the money, that the like tuning down top P is going to give you a particular outcome, and cranking up or down the temperature will give you a different outcome. And the combination of the two might be where you spend more time than actually like on the prompt.
Can you post your code so we can take a look at it? So I'd like to like see how you interact with the OpenAI API. See how that goes.
So
I think that would give me more of an idea of what's going on.
I did mention at the beginning that this was some personal code that I wrote. So as soon as I have cleaned it up just a little bit more, I'll share that for everybody.
No shame.
Just
Thank
use
you.
ChatGPT.
That's all I got.
Questions? That was great, guys. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's super interesting as well. Greg, I know how, yeah, sharing your code with this group of people is very, very, very daunting.
It is not dry. It is copy pasta over and over again. So yeah.
I shared some code with Greg once that I'd written. I was like, hey, what do you think about this? He's like, you wouldn't get a job here.